guys, welcome back to the YouTube channel for Rising Tide Consulting Group. I'm going to be doing another video for the Halo setup playlist. So this is where you'll find that video. It's going to be going a little bit backwards from the video I had last done. There were a couple comments on previous videos asking about some of the specific things I called out that I'd be doing later. And so I figured I would take that as a reminder to go do it now instead of forgetting about it again later. So there's comments were about PDF templates, um, reviewing how to build a PDF template, and managing the recurring invoices in bulk, generally in general. So like importing from a spreadsheet, updating recurring invoice profiles, things like that. So we're gonna jump into the screen share, and we will see how far I get and how much I remember of these topics, because it's been a while. This is my Halo. You can see we're in my recurring invoices that are here. We're going to jump into the PDF templates first. So we can go to invoices. We'll see here's a Mendy Online invoice that was generated from a recurring invoice 11. And we can see there's a PDF that we can open up here. And we really want to talk about like how this is actually designed and more details around the various pieces that are here. So first, anything in Halo that can be printed, for the most part, anything that can come out of the system is technically going to be a PDF template. So if we look at configuration for a moment, there's going to be a couple ways that you can do this. One of them is going to be under Documents right here, smack in the middle under Optional Features Documents. Notice you're already in PDF templates over here, and we can just flip between tickets, quotations, and so on and so forth. And literally, like I said, like almost anything that gets printed out of Halo or it gets exported out of Halo would be a PDF template. And so in this case, we're talking about invoices. We'll just go to invoices and take a look at that, right? The other way for us to get here is through the reporting section. If I go to reporting, there will be PDF templates here and takes you to the same place. Throughout Halo, though, you're going to find shortcuts, essentially. If I'm looking in billing, maybe general settings, under PDF templates, I'll have a button to take me to that same place where I can go ahead and hit PDF templates. The important thing to know about this is that the PDF templates, there's often going to be more than one PDF template that you're going to want to use depending on the scenario, the situation. And so what you kind of want to do is we don't want to have a scenario where a person doing the work, like the employee or agent, has to continue to remember which template to use and that they have to flip it and things like that. It often gets lost, right? So instead, what we want to do is lean into the configuration that Halo gives you so that the correct PDF template will show up depending on the scenario that you're using. In this case, for invoices, if we go to Billing General Settings and expand PDF templates, you'll see that there are different types of invoices that can be created. And each type of invoice can be assigned a specific PDF template. And so for the most part, we'll use a generic default invoice. That means this is okay. All of these will follow the default. If you want a different template specifically for that type of invoice, we can just change it here. So for example, ticket invoices, you may want to have a time breakdown. And so we're going to follow that invoice with time breakdown. Sales orders can follow the default, and recurring invoices can follow the default, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the first thing. But aside for just invoices, we also have other types of PDF templates as well that get used, and we want to lean into that too. So for example, if we were to look at sales opportunity types and just pick up an opportunity, we may have a specific type of PDF template that we would use for a specific type of opportunity when we are doing a quote specifically. If we're going to design a proposal or a quote off of this opportunity, we want to make sure we're using the correct PDF template for that, right? And so looking at this, we can see default PDF template for tickets, which is something else, and then default PDF template for quotations, which we would change to like formal proposal or something like that. Save. Right? So that way, even though under quoting, if I go to quotations somewhere down here, it's nice that they put it in alphabetical order. Here we go, quotations. we have the ability to set a PDF template here. By default, it's proposal, no subscription, recurring. But for the specific type of opportunity that I'm using, I'm going to use an override on that level. And you can do the same thing. There's going to be PDF template overrides on the client level. I think under settings, somewhere here. I don't remember exactly where it is, but there's definitely a PDF template override on the client level. Override portal. Let's see, PDF template. No. I'm gonna try to get. I don't really want to get lost, but I'm gonna try. There it is, PDF templates, billing. So over here we can override invoices or ticket invoices, and that's literally per client. So clients can have overridden if they need to. If you want something special for that client, you can do that. Right? I'm glad I found it. I didn't get down a tangent. The point is that these are controllable throughout different areas, and ideally you're setting up the system so that as long as the process is followed correctly, the right PDF template is going to be used when you're ready to send that out, right? One thing I'll jump into real quick, just to point out, I mentioned that on the ticket type that we had the ability to choose, this is like drive me nuts again. Okay, here, on any ticket type, we have the ability to choose the PDF template for the ticket itself, right? And if we're looking at PDF templates in general, the default context we're in is tickets. And so what that is that if you're looking at any ticket, real quick, we have the option to print the ticket. So up here on the top corner, if this loads, come on. Feels like I'm dragging the instance out of the dusty corners of Halo's trial systems to make this work. Here we go. We have the ability to print this print ticket, which will generate a PDF using that PDF template. And so that's basically how it works, right? Anything that comes out of the system is going to be a PDF template, just like that, right? Looks very familiar. So what we want to talk about right now is the invoice PDF templates, but keeping in mind that the things that we go through for the invoice PDF template is going to be the exact same thing, more or less, like 90% accuracy or 90% match to other PDF templates as well. Almost anything in one you can use in the other. There are some exceptions, I'll call it out, but for the most part, it's going to be the same thing across the board. So we'll flip over to invoices and let's do some quick review over what we have here. I'm just going to close these out. Here's the invoice we're looking at, right? So there's a couple things that are wrong with this. The logo is okay. We have invoice up here. That's fine too. We've got the address here. We may not like how this is coming out. And apparently that website doesn't work. So don't click on that. We have this table here. We definitely don't want tax number here, bank details. It's up to you what you want to put in here. Sometimes people do put payment information like wiring instructions on the invoice. You may want to replace it with like a payment link or something like that. But the key is that some of the things that we recommend doing up front is looking at this template. If we edit this and go to the main page, what you'll see is that the page is completely raw HTML. Now, this is the case if you don't have the new HTML designer enabled. If you do, then I feel sorry for you. But if you don't, this is what it looks like. And we were literally just change the things that we want so that it shows up on the PDF, right? So this bank details go here, we would usually remove. Tax number, we would probably remove as well. If we did want to keep it here, I would still change this. Instead of hard coding it, I would look at the variables that you have available to you and see if we have variables for them. So we do have like bank details, organization bank details, and it's literally going to call it directly from organization, configure my org, and it's right here. These bank details are here, right? Routing number, tax number, and so on. So what I would encourage you to do, even if you do want to keep your bank information in there, is to swap them out with the variable equivalent instead of hard coding them in the template. So that way, if there's ever a change that has to happen, you can just go to your organization and then do the change over here and it'll automatically update all of your templates. The other thing is that in the event you have more than one organization and you are doing multi-tenancy for some unknown reason, and I haven't been able to talk you out of it, you can just use the same PDF template if you want to for multiple organizations, and it'll just read the logo, the details, the address, and so on and so forth from the organization variables so that the template doesn't have to change, right? Now we do have like or address here. We don't like necessarily the way this comes out. Most people want to change this to be a different format so it's easier, but this is all just one big dollar variable called OR address. And so ideally we can do something that is a little bit different. I actually don't think OR address can be broken up. Let's see, organization. It's not even a type here, actually. That's kind of funny. Yeah, okay, let's look at address and see what we have. It looks like the only one that we have is the OR address. Doesn't look like we can break it up necessarily. Um, and so what we would maybe do that is we would take that and hard code that specifically so that it's a better format. Alternatively, if you want to, you can take this and rewrite this address to match what you're looking for. Right, so something like USA followed by the postal zip code like that would mean that when we go back to the PDF and I generate a new PDF, it'll come out following that format. Now, you may have problems doing that because depending on your integration, depending on your accounting package, and depending on if you're using like Avalara or something like that, it may require the address to be in a very specific format so that it can read it correctly. But that's just one of the things to keep in mind about that. Okay. Looking back over here, we're actually gonna pull these out completely. So I'm gonna pull both of these out. That's usually what I recommend doing. Um, if we want that information on here, we can put it down at the bottom. We have a lot of empty space usually on the last page. So we can put something there to make that look nicer or something like that. In this case, we changed the username variable to be accounts first name and accounts last name. And so what that's doing is by default, it's going to pull the user of the invoice. Well, this invoice doesn't have a user. In fact, invoices generally do not have users. But instead, what we want to do, and most of the companies are going to follow the same thing, the invoice should be addressed to the accounts payable person, like whoever's going to be getting that. So looking at the billing tab, we have an account's first name and account's last name with an account's email address. This is who we want that invoice to be addressed to most of the time. The financial contact of the client is going to be this information here. And so now we can go back here. That's going to be account's first name and last name. Dollar area is the client. You may want the area site, which is just one more word. It's the same variable, I'm pretty sure. You can go here and take a look at our variables. Area site shows client and site name. If we wanted to do it differently, we could just do site by itself. So site by itself is a site name. So we could just put the site, the word site in, and so that way we can do, dollar variable, and then we can do whatever formatting we want between the two. Or if we just want to follow the formatting that Halo gives you for the dollar area site, you can do that as well, and so on. Okay, let's go ahead and save this and take a look at what changes have happened now at this point. So we generate a new PDF, and we'll see that we now have Mendy Green, Mendy Online, :main. Okay, so that's not the best formatting, but we can, like I said, replace that with a / or do whatever you want with that. Okay. The other thing is, and this will be a little counterintuitive initially, but the other thing that we want to do is this invoice number. Most of the time, the invoice number, and it's going to depend on your accounting package again and how you're configured in Halo, but the internal ID of the invoice in Halo, invoice number 8 in this case, or invoice 1, does not necessarily match the third-party invoice number. And so if we're looking at the columns here, notice I've got a third-party invoice number. I have ID here, which is going to be the Halo invoice number, not the ID of the document. And then I've got 2, which is the invoice number for Halo, but it's actually 9 in QuickBooks, right? This invoice number is going to be 9 in QuickBooks. And so if I open this up and generate PDF, um, what we'll probably see 9 there because that's also the ID as it so happens, but it's not necessarily the right variable to use. If we're looking at the HaloPSA variables and we're looking at invoice number, we have $invoice number, right? We also have third-party invoice number, which is really the one that we want to use. And then there's invoice ID, which is the one that we're currently using. And that's going to be the ID number of the document, which is not the same thing as the Halo invoice number necessarily. And it's not the same thing as the invoice number inside of QuickBooks or 0. And so what we want to do is inside of our PDF template, we're just going to change that variable from $invoice ID to be $third party invoice number, right? We can add some more things in here. We can do like, there's a due date, there's the invoice date, which is the date of the invoice being created, not really helpful to you. We do have like the due date, if we want to put the invoice due date on there instead, which may be blank depending on your settings on the invoice. So we want to pay attention to that. And then we also have things like, so looking back at the PDF, we have a subtotal, tax, and total. But what if there's a partial payment on the invoice? Like, how do we see that if we're sending out a new invoice? What if there's outstanding credits or things like that? So there are other templates or other variables that we can use, like showing total credit applied. We can indicate if it's a type ID of an invoice, bill, credit, etc. So we can swap out the word invoice up here with, if I can find out where that is actually. Here's or name, or address, or website, invoice right here. We can swap that out with the invoice type ID. Let's do that. Let's see what it comes up with. I don't think I've actually used this variable before. And then let's see, going back to our variables, let's look at the amount, net amount, credit total. There's like a paid, um, invoice paid total paid on the invoice, payment status, right? So we potentially want to use these as well. And then you could even include like total amount due, which is across all of your open invoices, you still have a balance of total amount due, right? So you can really build like a really fancy or nice invoice template if we want to, that'll allow us to look semi-decent with more information than what we have presented here. The other thing that you can do is it's HTML. Like you can just put your payment link directly inside of here using, there's a payment, 1 second, URL, something. 0 invoice URL will take you to the online invoice inside of 0 where you can make a payment. And then you've got the generic invoice URL, which will also allow you to pull up the online URL. If it's QuickBooks Online has the ability to use the QBO payment link coming down from QuickBooks that'll sync in as of 196, I think, maybe 198. It'll bring that payment link down. Let's see. Somewhere here, there'll be added a setting for QuickBooks Online integrations that the invoice payment URL can be retrieved when sending invoices to QuickBooks Online. Right, so there's no version on here. I'm pretty sure it's 196, but or one of those versions, but I could be wrong. And that'll give you a setting inside of your QuickBooks Online configuration. So if we go to QuickBooks Online, let's see if it's still set up on my system here. We can go into QBO. 1 second, what was that? No, okay, let's go in. Rising Tide demo, and then when we sync webhooks, syncing to QuickBooks maybe. return the online payment link. There we go. So I'm on version 2190, which is fairly old. So it's actually not 196, but it is one of the beta versions after the stable. So I say it's old, but it's only old in regards to being on beta. It's still a beta version. 290 is where that was introduced. If you're on beta or the release candidate, you'll be able to turn that on, and it'll bring the payment link from QuickBooks Online down to the generic invoice URL, which will allow you to then include it on the PDF, um, as well as on the email going out to the client when you send out the invoice. So it's a bunch of stuff you can do inside of that. I'm not really going to show you a nicely designed HTML invoice because I'm not a designer in any way, shape, or form. I use ChatGPT for all that stuff. But what I will do is talk about the rest of the PDF template configuration because there's other stuff beyond the HTML that's here. Okay, so we're going to save this for right now, and I'm going to close this out, close this out, close that out. We'll generate a new PDF for the Mendy Online, and then we'll talk about what the different parts are and how it comes out into this document. Okay. So actually, this doesn't do what we want it to. Being a type ID is supposed to be, well, according to the variables, it says it would be like credit, memo, bill, or whatever. So that's not really helpful, but it's good to know how that works. Um, One of the things that I'll say is that like using dynamic CSS, like using CSS selectors, you can use these variables that you may not realize are helpful because I can say if I know what the ID number for invoice is, I can use CSS to basically style the entire document because it's an invoice as opposed to a bill. And then I can just reuse that same PDF template with different stylings that show up like red versus green or whatever, based off having an amount due, based off it being paid. We can put like watermarks in place and things like that using dynamic CSS and CSS selectors. Um, by basically utilizing that dollar variable as your CSS selector, essentially. So we would put like an HTML element would have a data object or a data attribute with the value of that dollar variable, and then you would just create different blocks of CSS that would select based off of the value being 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. And then when you generate the document, that variable expands to either 1, 2, or 3, and then it matches whatever styling you have set up for each of those types. Okay. Again, I'm not going to show that because while I understand the concepts, being able to write it up on screen and display it to you is a very different thing. Maybe we'll see if Elle can do that, given her proficiency in CSS and HTML significantly better than mine. With that being said, let's move on to the actual rest of the PDF document. So if we're looking at this template, there's a bunch of different sections within each template. The details tab is going to be the metadata related to the actual template itself, not the documents being created, not the invoice, but the template itself as a configuration entity. The details tab will configure that template. So we've got the name, we've got of that template, we've got what type it's for, a description if we want to put more notes in. We can tell it to append or prepend PDF documents before or after, right? To bundle up an entire document. And we do that by just either using this checkbox to append it or unchecking it to leave it prepended, right? And then we can override the attachment name. I don't really know what this does or why we would attach an XML potentially. So we'd have to look into that. There's a question mark here, actually. I wonder if it takes me to anywhere helpful. XML. It's actually not here, which is ironic. Yeah, so although there's a question mark here, it doesn't take you to the right place. So we can include reports on the PDF template. We're going to come back and talk about this later on in this same video, so don't worry, I'm not going to forget. But we'll come back and talk about this in more detail in a few moments. The appearance tab that we have here will describe the actual document styling, like the entire document styling, right? And so we can say, here's our organization color. We want it to be displayed in landscape versus portrait. Our margin, our footers are here. And we can go absolutely crazy by doing HTML footers or putting an HTML header and going really, really nuts. So some of the examples, and this I can actually, maybe I'll actually pull off of my live Halo and just recreate that real quick so you can kind of see what happens. But if we were to do this, I'm on a different screen right now while I pull this up real quick. Okay, so the way this is set up in my live Halo when we're looking at this is I have margin set to 0. We're on portrait. We're using an HTML header. Okay, so this is going to pull in a quote number, which is not really what we want. We can say this is going to be invoice number, and then we can put in the invoice number that we had there, right? Or we can use third-party invoice number or whatever we want at that point. And then our header height was going to be 70. We're going to include a footer as well. We're going to use HTML footer instead, and that's going to be this. Now this will have like my logo. It's going to have the Rising Tide email, right? Let's just say someemail.net. We're going to have a phone number here as well that you can just go back and watch the recording if you want to see what it actually was, but I'm just going to change it anyways. And then we have the footer height, which will be 70. Now we could do a background image for the entire document. It's going to apply to every page. I highly recommend not doing this. It looks ridiculous. Unless you're a really good designer, you can make it look good. Other than that, we've got the override page width and height, which you can make 8.5 by 11 if you want to. All right, so if we wanted to do that, I think in ours system, it's currently set to 0, and we're going to print it to screen instead of a printer, right? Which will control some of the print margins and stuff like that. Okay, so this is going to be what that looks like. And now notice if I go back to my invoice here and I just generate another PDF, you can kind of see like how this is starting to affect that invoice. So we've got the Rising Tide banner, we've got invoice number, right? Invoice number is 0 in this case because there's no third-party invoice number. So that's why that's a 0. We do have the same logo and information we put up here underneath that. We have our table, our sum, and then down here we've got, look at that, Rising Tide, our website, someemail.net, and then some cell phone number and a page number. All right, so you can make it look really, really good. If you want to, you could also completely overwhelm the client with way too much color and information that's not helpful. So just something to keep in mind. That's what the appearance does. It's basically styling every single page to follow this template, header, footers, and the overall page design and stuff like that. This details table is the crux of the invoice and the quote and the sales order and anything else that you're sending out with a table on it. You are able to come in here and make whatever changes you want to include other parts or other information about the item, and you can even include a custom column where you can write raw HTML. And so you basically have unlimited control of the PDF template. It can get really, really wild. If you notice in here, I've got like these groups of these things. This information that's being displayed primarily looks like it's going to be from the long description. And I only say that because looking at these down here, we can see third-party licensing. If we look at these third-party licensing, the short description or just the description is 1 line, but this is 2 lines, right? And so that's how it's being displayed on the PDF. That's 2 lines. So that's why I think it's the long description. We could do something a little bit different though. We can do, we can use both. We can have both description and long description, like item name. We can have, let's put that over here, right? We can literally put whatever columns that we want on here. Let's put, that's already the same thing. What about short? What about name? We already did that too. What about item external reference if we wanted to? Right? If this was like a outside PO number or something like that, or third party, not a PO number, but like a SKU or something like that, we can put that in there. If we wanted to do tax, which is already on here, We can do unit price before discount. We can do with a discount as well. And so we can literally put any field that exists in that dropdown, we can throw into the table just by modifying this table. Let me go ahead and generate the PDF. Here's what it's going to look like. Let's save that and then generate PDF. Right, and so now we've got more things. We've got the description and item name, which is basically the same. At this point, there's not much difference. We've got quantity, unit tax, price, right, which is the sum of these, which is completely fine. We have external reference and start date, which doesn't do anything for me. But if I were to say this start date is, I don't even know if I can set a start date on here actually. No, because it's a different field. I'm not even sure what it's doing on there. But if we were to discount this and say we're going to give it 25% discount, let's say, and save that. And then we go back to our table and we're just going to remove that and that, and let's just add a discount in here. Discount percent. And then we can put discount again. Discount. Right? And then we can say price before discount. Right? And so then we can say like the following. Or something like this. And we can just drag and drop and change the table around. But you kind of get the point. Like the table is going to basically drive, the details table is going to drive what gets displayed on the invoice over here. So here I'm doing a 25% discount. The discount amount is $312.50. The unit price before discount is $250. The unit price is $187. Right? So, and our total price is $937.50. So we can see how we can represent that on the line item if we wanted to for the client. The next thing is, how does this actually get into the PDF template itself, into the actual PDF document? So if we're going to close these out for a moment and take a look at this again, when we go back to our pages will define how many pages show up inside of the document, but it will also bleed over to more than one page if it has to, like this one does, right? So just by putting everything in page one, if it does have bleed over, it will do a page cut automatically. And it tries to keep it graceful within the table so that it's not something that gets cut off in the middle of the document. So over here, we can see this is the first, but then we have the text over here. It's not being cut off by the margin. It's being displayed, even if it's not the way we necessarily want that to happen. So that does happen or tries to do its best there. Inside of the document here, inside the PDF page, the way this works is we have 3 sections where we can put HTML. So we have the core template HTML, we've got the invoice line table row HTML, we've got the invoice group table row HTML. Where in this case, in both of these scenarios, you basically have the exact same HTML. It's a dollar variable for details line. What happens is if it's a group defined based off of this or this, if it's a group of items, then the document is going to shade it a color of gray based off the styling, right? And so these two come together inside of the core template. You'll notice that there's something called dollar details table. It's inside of a style table. It's called dollar details table. And what this is going to do is it's going to essentially look at the table here, and it's going to go row by row, and it's going to say, is it a group? If it's a group, expand this. Sorry, this. And when it expands this, it's going to look at the dollar details line, and it's going to say, okay, look here and expand each of these for that line. So it's just one big expansion of variables, like literally, like it's about 3 or 4 levels deep of nested variables. And you don't need to use it. If you wanted to put your own variables in, you could essentially change this out with your own variables referenced from here, or you can add more variables in if you want to do more things. Like for example, actually, I've never tried this before, but let's just do this really fast. If I just go to Let's see if I can grab, I honestly have no idea how this is going to look, but let's grab the um, MSP Geek image, let's say, and let's just throw inside of here the MSP Geek image and see how it looks now, right? So like theoretically speaking, it should include it in every row of that table. It'll probably look really bad, but let's see how badly it messes with the actual table line. Look at that. Right, so it's a little bit confused. It basically put it in outside of the items because it's not part of the dollar variable expansion. Um, but that's just an example. Like it's literally just rendering that HTML each time for each line item. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 6 logos. So that's literally how it works. Is it just looks at that table and it just repeats it for each row. And then let's pull this out. If it's a header, a group, we can put something else in here if we wanted to, like change the background color, make it bold, or do whatever other stuff you want to do to the specific groups. And that's basically it. So these two come together to align up and make up the details table based off of the columns that you specified here. And then this entire page or document template comes together to build out the invoice that you see here. Now, I mentioned that we're going to come back to the reports, and I also mentioned that it's very similar to almost every other PDF template because every other type of PDF template basically follows the same rules. So we're going to talk about that first. We're going to flip over and we're going to look at the invoices time breakdown. If you notice on this PDF template, we actually have two reports that are included here. Action report for invoice, device report for invoice. The way this works, and it kind of tells you this here in a very ambiguous way, but inside of your report that you're going to use, you have to make sure that you're filtering based off of the invoice ID. And so if we're looking at this report specifically and go look at the data source, we'll see SQL is essentially filtering where the action invoice number is equal to $invoice ID. So that $invoice ID is this variable, and that's going to be what the system uses to filter your results to only be relevant to that invoice. If you only wanted things for that client, then you'd have to essentially extract the client ID from the invoice table by using the $invoice ID variable, and then from there, pull anything related to that client ID. If you wanted to go by site, you'd have to go one level up to pull the site specific, and then you essentially get everything by site. And it's all that same exact mechanism that we would do with this dollar variable of invoice ID. Now, when you add it into the invoice, you're going to see a table here. It shows you the ID, which is the ID of the report, the name to know what report it is. But then you have this dollar variable that exists. And what you're going to do is you're going to take this dollar variable and put it into the page. So notice this time breakdown page. We're going to edit that page. And all we're going to see here is a dollar variable for that report data, report 158 data, right? Or there's a dollar variable, for the 157 over here. And that's it. It's just going to extract the results of that report and put it into the table in place of the dollar variable, very similar to how we described the other dollar details table is going to work. And then finally, the important thing to know is that if you're using a custom HTML appearance on a report, you do not want to put this inside of a table. You want to remove the table and just put the dollar variable by itself, because that's going to bring across the entire HTML into the PDF, and it's going to conflict with nested tables and other kinds of things. If you are not using custom appearance on the report, then you will want to put it inside of a table in the PDF so that it can properly render the column names and stuff like that. Another thing to note is if you are doing this out of the box, see this, you've got like the logo, detailed table, etc. Notice that none of these are or have the styled table class. So we're not actually doing this. This is a bug, or not really, I guess it's a bug. It's just a mistake that exists in the configuration. It's not quite like a code bug, it's really just a templating bug with how their database starts up. Over here in the main page, you'll notice this is called out style table and so on and so forth. But over here, you're using style table, which is fine. Now, the reason why it's not a huge deal on this template is because the pages actually do combine. The CSS will coalesce together across the entire document, and it will have no problem referencing that class from the main page. However, if you were to start a brand new PDF template, and we're just going to save this as test and save, and look at the pages, we have a main page, and we edit this, what you'll see is that the styled table class no longer exists because it's not part of the default configuration. But if you look over here into the details table, right, this is still a detailed table. So you just need to make sure that you're aware of what the styling is going to look like on the PDF template and what you're doing. If you're going to change or copy a table from another template, that styled table class may not actually exist if it's going to a brand new template. So just be on the lookout for that when you work on this. Okay. The other thing that we're going to talk about is the difference between quotations. Now, there are other differences as well between the individual PDF templates. Most commonly is the dollar variable that you're going to use to reference when you're pulling in reports. If I want to go to like contracts, for example, and I want to include a report, I have to use the dollar contract ID as opposed to invoice ID. If I want to go to tickets and I want to pull in a report, it's going to be dollar fault ID instead. All right, so that's number one, pretty basic, and the PDF template will pretty much tell you that. The other thing that exists that's different is in the quotation section, we have the ability to actually break apart the page. If we're looking at the details page here, we can actually break apart the page using HTML comments. And so if you're looking through here, you'll notice that there are these comments that exist, non-recurring, monthly, and so on. And this is really just coming from here. This does not exist anywhere except the quote itself, right? This subtext up here will show you this text and table will only show in the quotations proposals that contains monthly lines because it's got the monthly comment on here. We can replace that with recurring, and it's only going to show recurring ones, or non-recurring to only show non-recurring ones. And so you can really build out your quotation proposal to be very, very powerful based off of the types of items that you're quoting out on that proposal. Right? That's basically it for PDF templates. It got a little longer than I expected, so I'm going to stop here, and then we'll do another video for importing recurring invoices and recurring invoice profiles, and so on and so forth. I will talk about a new feature actually that did come out though, that should make life easier for everyone, that you may or may not have seen already. If you're looking at a recurring invoice, if I go back to my invoice and I go to recurring invoice 1, I now have the option to clone the recurring invoice to a different client. And so now I can just instantly copy what I have as like a template. The quantities still come across the automatic quantity calculation. I just have to go back in here and change the filter if it was something that's client specific. So if it was like a license or subscription automatic quantity calculation, like down here we see MSP advisors, right? This is now saying all licenses as opposed to the specific license that we were looking at. So we want to just make sure we're choosing the right license type again once that's done so that it can reset that number. But that's essentially it. Like if you have recurring invoice with a very complicated build out and format and everything like that, and you just want to copy it to other clients, you can just hit the clone button and it'll do it for you. And then just go fix the automatic linking of the licensing, and any other automatic quantity calculation has to be fixed after that. I hope this was helpful. Hopefully it made sense. Hopefully you don't need too much help with HTML. That's what AI is for nowadays, or a designer. Yeah, leave your comments below, and thanks for watching.